Hello, Intro to Psych. This is your brain weirdness lesson. This one is actually, I'm not going to lie, it's actually way better in person where we can do some video demos and some other in-person demonstrations of this stuff. But there's a lot of words. There's a lot of words in this one. So I thought I would do it as a video so you can stop and pause, come back, and listen to the examples again, not just be little robots that like to write down all the words on the screen. You can actually get some explanations. Okay, we're going to start off with the basic definition of cognitive neuroscience. Big fancy word, and it just means study of the brain activity linked with its mental processes. So the idea that we're not just brain robots. Our brain is not just the boss of us. I mean, I guess biologically it kind of is, but that we have thoughts and feelings and emotions attached to what our brain does. And you can kind of decide for yourself as you continue to learn here, is your brain telling your thoughts and emotions what they are, or do your thoughts and emotions tell your brain what to do? It's inconclusive right now, and arguably it's probably a little bit of both. But cognitive neuroscientists study this stuff, and one of their main tools is by reading the brain with CAT scans, MRIs, fMRIs, PET scans, EEGs, all sorts of things, and that's how brains can be read. And the lingo is that a brain area might light up or show activity when thinking about certain things, including as specifically as movement and love. So when I say the brain is lighting up, I don't mean that you have lights in there. I mean, if a brain is currently being scanned, MRI, fMRI, PET scan, CAT scan, all that stuff, those are the areas showing activity. Okay, so just so you're comfortable with that. And cognitive neuroscientists have determined that we do have two hemispheres. They are nearly mirror images of each other. We did this, or we're going to do this in class, to show how this is kind of what a hemisphere looks like, including with a little cerebellum back here, and that they share info through their corpus callosum. So this little web of neurons that connects the two sides. Brain lateralization, another big fancy word, that means that certain hemispheres specialize in certain functions. One that I'm going to talk about a lot is the left specializes in language. But people need and use both sides for most things. Both sides are constantly talking to each other. So while I've got this graphic and it's like super cool of the idea of what the left brain and right brain looks like, this is technically like a myth. This is pseudoscience, fake science. Because what this theory that I'm left-brained or I'm right-brained would mean is that you're using one side more or the other based on like your personality or who you are. You're not left-brained. You're not right-brained. It just so happens that certain things happen a little bit more on the left or a little bit more on the right, depending on what they are. But you use both all the time, and this is a very, very exaggerated misuse of psychology. Okay, so what does happen on the two sides? If they do lateralize or specialize, what happens on what side? So you have little thought bubbles. Let's get it down on paper, and then I'm going to kind of compare them to you, for you. The left controls the right side of the body. The left is also in control of language skills, which goes hand in hand with verbal memories, like memories of what people say, or what you've read or words that you've come across. Your arithmetic, your math, your logic, and parts of something. I'm going to come back to that in a second. On the right side, it controls the left side of your body. This is the side that also recognizes faces, nonverbal cues, spatial reasoning, values, and the whole. Values like you value community, you value excellence, those sorts of values. So let's talk about this parts and whole thing. Right now, as you look at my little square here, you can see the parts. You can see that I have my glasses that I hardly ever wear on, that there's a picture frame over here, that I have a nose, that I have a mouth, that there's Bucky's chilling out right there. But all together, you understand that I am a 3D person sitting in a room recording herself, that I am not just floating glasses, or I'm not just a little figurine of Bucky. That you can put all these parts together. Your left side can break it apart, but then your right side kind of processes everything as like big picture. Nonverbal cues might be more like body language, like, I'm really tired. Or, hey, I am ready to teach you this next thing and have tons of energy today. So not so much based on my tone of voice or my verbal, but the things like my body language or spatial reasoning, like my hand is very close to the camera. My hand is very far from the camera. My head is blocking a picture frame. My head is to the side of the picture frame. So like the ball is coming at me, hand-eye coordination to my athletes. Like the ball is coming at me. I better catch it or get out of the way. So spatial reasoning. Next, we have association areas. These are areas of the cortex. So this part, the thing that, like the lobes and stuff, that are involved in higher mental functioning, such as language and speech. So there are these two special areas that have to do with talking and understanding each other. One is Wernicke's area. It is located in the left temporal lobe. Remember, we learned temporal right by our ears here. It is involved in language comprehension and expression. So this is the area that understands what the word understands is. That if I say, this is my cup and straw, that even if I say, hey, can you grab me my cup and my straw? You know what I'm talking about. It also is in charge of understanding like, hey, I'm super excited today, and this is my tone of voice about being super excited. Unlike before, where it was more like body language, or that I'm really angry right now, and I'm going to use my, maybe I'm really fake angry right now because it's my fake angry voice. As opposed to just my body language of staring at the screen, okay? So the language part, the tone of voice, and the understanding of what my language means. Broca's area, gotta get my little brains, oh shoot, I want my brain to rotate. This one does, apparently. Oh, there it goes, okay. Broca's area is the left frontal lobe. So it's more towards the front, like up here, oh, my left side, up here. And that is the motor movement for speaking. So it lets you move your mouth to make the words and sounds, like your mouth, your teeth, your tongue. It controls the interaction of those muscles to make the words come out the way you want them to sound. So Wernicke's area, temporal, has to do with understanding. So I kind of remember it like how you hear words and think about it. And then Broca's area, we know the motor cortex is in our frontal lobe. Or we are learning that the motor cortex is in the frontal lobe, motor cortex, and so it's in charge of the movement of your mouth. Then we have something called aphasia, and aphasia is like a brain damage. So it's a loss of ability to understand or express speech caused specifically by brain damage to one of these two areas. So if you have damage to Wernicke's area, you can't understand words. Like you can hear them. Maybe you can even say them. You just don't know what they mean. And then damage to Broca's area is you can't say them. It's like your thoughts are in your head, but you can't get them out. I'm going to give you some case studies, some little video clips in class of people that are experiencing these things. And so you can kind of get what I'm talking about. Luckily, thankfully, after talk of brain damage, we have more recent science, last couple decades, we have discovered that our brains are somewhat plastic. Fancy term, neuroplasticity. And what this means is that our brain has an ability to change throughout our life due to use. So if you don't use a certain part of your brain, you kind of lose those neuron connections. Let's say you know how to speak a foreign language. I used to know how to speak German. And so as I learned it in high school and college, those neurons were building up in my left side of my brain, language. And those connections, I think of like walking through the woods or a field. The more you walk through it, the more that path clears and the easier it is to go through that path. But as you stop using that path through your brain, it kind of breaks down. It's called synaptic pruning, like pruning a bush. Like it kind of just like cuts apart and disappears. And so if you want to get really, really good at something, whether it's studying psychology or a sport or an instrument or a language or a skill or mastering a video game level, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it because that path is going to get smoother and faster, that neural connection in your brain. But if you stop, then that's going to be very difficult for you to do again. Not impossible, but very difficult. It's going to take you a lot longer and a lot more practice to master that skill again. The other important thing about brain plasticity is the knowledge that brain activity can transfer from one area to another if the original area is damaged. So whether we already have or are going to, we're going to talk about what it means to have a hemispherectomy, when part of your brain is removed, probably because of seizures and stuff, or like other brain tumors. And if you're young enough, what should have happened on one side of your hemisphere could go to the other hemisphere. And so our brain is capable of taking over different functions, even if it wasn't originally designed that way. And even newer science is neurogenesis. And recent science, science back in the day didn't think that neurons would regenerate. So when you killed a brain cell, like that was it, that cell was gone. And so that's why you didn't want to hit your head or do drugs or drink. And largely that's still true. For the most part, neurons cannot regenerate. But we have started to find out that maybe they can, at least a little bit. So it's this new science, and it's the ability of the brain to generate new neurons, even as an adult. This is best in babies and children, but even adults possibly can do this, perhaps by learning, by studying. That's why it's good for older people to keep their brains active and read and do classes and push themselves to do new things. And also exercise. As you exercise and release endorphins, there's some evidence that, I'm going to read this part because I mess it up, that endorphins released from the hypothalamus and pituitary glands actually increase neurogenesis. So another reason that exercise is really good for you. But we do know the brain's ability to do neurogenesis does decrease with age and with stress. Okay, the next really cool thing I want to teach you is a split brain procedure. Sometimes if someone has a severe case of epilepsy, what that means is that their neurons in their brain are misfiring. There's a little electrical storm between the two hemispheres. So in that corpus callosum, that part keeping the two hemispheres talking to each other, they're misfiring. Their messages aren't clear, and it's causing seizures, possibly so much so that the person could be physically harming themselves, like slamming themselves down on the ground or knocking into things. And then it could be so risky that their lives could be in danger. And so the neurosurgeon might choose to cut the corpus callosum. So one thing it has allowed scientists to do is to study lateralization. What does the left side do? What does the right side do? Because when they aren't talking to each other, the brain can still, oddly enough, still operate somewhat normally, but we know that what happens is not, specific to one side or the other because it's no longer possible for the brain to communicate left to right. And so the conclusions this has allowed us is to learn that hemispheres can work normally even if they're separated. And you will ultimately, this is the fascinating part, this is what blows my mind, you will be able to visually know items shown to your right hemisphere, but you will be able to only speak items shown to the left hemisphere. And you're going to have to trust me on this one to just write this down. This is a very hard one to understand just through a PowerPoint. I'm going to have to show you some videos and some demos, but just write this down for now. So yeah, your right hemisphere is only capable of recognizing images and the physical. Like if I said to grab Bucky, then like I said, this is hard to do in PowerPoint. You could say like this because of your right hemisphere. But if I asked you what is the name of this thing, your left hemisphere would have to be the thing that says Bucky. More on this in class. Way hard to explain in a PowerPoint. Last thing, mirror neurons. These are the last super cool thing that I want us to talk about. These are specialized neurons in our brains that react when you're observing other people performing an action. So much so that in your brain, your responses are similar as if you are doing it yourself. So like if you watch someone get tackled, like on a football field, like a really hard hit during a Packer game or Badger game, you might be like, oh, that looked harsh. And so you kind of wince and maybe even pull back and like, dang, like you can kind of feel it. But nothing's happening. You're just on your couch watching TV. Or when your friend is crying about something and it has nothing to do with you, but your friend is crying, and then all of a sudden you find yourself crying, like, you're not crying, I'm crying, or I'm not crying, you're crying. However that works, you are showing empathy. You are showing that you understand what the other person's going through. But this isn't just pure emotional intelligence. This is like brain science. And the fact that we have neurons that allow us to do it proves, at least biological psychologists believe, that it proves human social nature, that humans must be designed to live together, work together, cooperate, understand each other, because these mirror neurons allow us to imitate and empathize with each other. So something as basic of going up to a baby and being like, clap, 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 or saying mama and expecting them to copy you, mirror neurons. The fact that when someone gets hurt or someone eats something gross, and you're like, ooh, like you're eating that, I can't believe you're eating that, and you feel grossed out, or you feel pain when someone else is hurt, or you feel sad when they're showing like they're crying. It's based on observational learning, and the idea is that you're learning by seeing other people do something. Here are my examples. I guess I already went through all those, but write them down. And I will go through this a little bit more in class with the examples. But yeah, isn't that crazy? We understand each other just by looking at each other. That's where empathy comes from. So weird. Brain weirdness. All right. Thank you for taking your notes.